Hello, everyone. Sunny here. This is episode 8 of the Zeitgeist Melbourne podcast. Today's show, will be a bit different. I'm going to be replaying a podcast I did back in 2012 with another Zeitgeister, Chris School, where we were talking at the time about planned obsolescence, a fascinating topic that we'll be building up on in the future. As for why the podcast isn't happening live today, I think sounds from the background are a self-evident reason. We're having a bit of a party here, and we're moving out of the house in a week. So today and the podcast just couldn't happen as normal. But I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. Chris and I did a podcast called TMR Podcast for going on a year back in 2012, and this was probably one of our best shows. I'm going to play it right now.
On top of Old Horror Hill, in a secret laboratory, Professor Weirdo and Count Kook were in their monstrous glory. 6 drops of the essence.
Hi, welcome to TMR Podcast number 3, Planned Obsolescence, the Enemy of Business. TMR Podcast stands for Technology, Myths and Realities, brought to you by Zero Fluoride Water Filters, brought to you by Integrated Nature.
You can pre-order them at integratednature.com, and as we sip this lovely filtered fluoride-free water, scented by some mint leaves that grow in my garden, today our topic is going to be planned obsolescence in the product life cycle, and I would say that it's not a term that most people are familiar with.
No, most people just accept it.
Now, let's summarize what this is in the first, 30 seconds. You see, look around you, from the computers that you are perceiving us on, or the phones that are in your pockets, or whatever electronic devices, to the light bulbs on your ceiling. Everything that envelops your everyday life has a lifespan in mind. What I'm trying to say is, when I say a lifespan in mind, some 100 years ago, when we built stuff, we built it as good as humanly possible to last as long as humanly possible. Now stuff is literally built to fall apart, break down, and actually built to become obsolete. If you've noticed, the switches on your electronic devices are ever evolving and ever changing, so the new devices don't work with the old ones, and the connections. It's not only about the data transfer rate or the power connections. It is simply that we live in an environment where the perpetual consumption of goods, perpetual consumption of stuff, is prioritized over what that stuff actually brings to our lives.
And the reason for that is because a company can then set its sights on reproducing the same product over and over again as it expires, as its life expires. So it works out really well for them, and they've come together to realize that there's certain ways they can do this. It's not just one way of putting let's an example, a printer that can print 18,000 sheets, and at 18,000 sheets it has a chip in it that says time to turn off. This product is now broken and needs to be repaired. The cost repairs to that printer could be 3 times more than what a new printer's worth.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with the printer. It just...
Right there under your feet, Chris, is my brother printer that I paid $50 for, and it cost me $50 to get a new cartridge every time. And I mean, it's only the fact that, I try to be as conscientious as I can that I don't grab a new printer. I don't know what I do with all these printers, but look, let's give the people out there something tangible as a starting point. A really simple invention where this scenario illustrates itself, and perhaps the historical starting point for planned obsolescence. And out of every device under the sun that had to fall victim to this, it's a humble little light bulb. The light bulbs were first developed, they were first commercialized by Thomas Edison, and that was way back in 1881. And there's a video, you can find it on YouTube, Thomas Edison's first ever light bulb, of Thomas Edison, probably, in his late 60s, sitting there like a ghoul with a light bulb shining next to him. And believe it or not, that first ever light bulb had, in GE's words and Edison's words, they had 1,500 hours, 1,500 hours it lasted. And they said, that's a modest starting point. We will inevitably improve on that. Within, I think, 5 or 6 years of that, the light bulbs are advertised at 2,500 hours.
Yeah, but you can see from the point of view in business that you would sell your light bulb over Edison's by saying, I've perfected it to run 2,500 hours, therefore more value, lasts longer, you don't have to replace it. So that's called a race to the top.
Also, when the first light bulb comes out, people are buying light bulbs because they don't have them. The market is huge; it's infinite.
Oh yeah, but
that problem of people already having a light bulb and needing to replace one hasn't come up yet. But
if I'm going to pay $1 for a light bulb and one's 1,000 hours and one's 2,500, I know which one I'm going to buy if they're both $1. So if I'm the opposition company and I can produce one at 2,500 hours, naturally I'm going to buy that one because I won't have to replace it.
And brings us to our next, sort of historical landmark, and this is it happened in 1924. Now, there was this thing, and people called it the Phoebus Cartel, and then basically a number of companies that made light bulbs started meeting together in Geneva.
You're not talking about a cartel, are you, Sonny? Because we know they don't exist.
Well, actually, Chris, this one is a documented case.
Starting to sound like conspiracy theory. People will turn off, Sonny.
Well, rich, powerful people sometimes...
Do they actually meet?
Yeah.
And discuss prices? Not like the oil companies.
Believe it or not, Chris.
I'm nearly ready to walk out.
Yeah. I had to
shock.
I had to check it about 5 or 6 times, Like, I really... I wonder if I'd like to see some comments relating to conspiracy theory.
Oh, well.
This is inevitably...
Well, sorry, just quickly before I forget, from last week we talked about a way that we could fix the fuel prices.
Oh, really? Come on.
No, and because we know that that's a cartel, conspiracy theory,
right.
Cartel, but we'll talk about that at the end of the program about how we can change that.
I tell you what, I have this thing that about half an hour we're going to get to like a recap stage.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about
yeah, fair enough.
The fuel prices, but Chris has a very, very, very intelligent idea. Now, let's continue. Believe it or not, against every one of my better senses of judgment, it's a historical fact that a number of electrical companies that made light bulbs met, and there are documents from 3 separate manufacturers, Osram, Philips, and Compagnie des Lampes in France. So these things come out some 80, 90 years later. To set the stage, in 1924, 2,500 hours is now the minimal standard. So basically, if you're buying a light bulb that doesn't last 2,500 hours, then,
you're getting ripped.
You're getting ripped. And patents are coming out for 10,000 hours. People are figuring out how to make these filaments that just don't burn away. And it's not a giant feat of engineering, oxidation, the way they burn out is just traces of corrosive gases that happen to be in there, or maybe the filament is too thin. But
tell the people, these have been put into these light globes, these oxidizing gases, filaments that are made of a bad metal, a metal that's not pure tungsten or whatever they use as a filament. They use a few different types of metal for that particular reason, so they want them to break down. They're made to break down.
Well, that really starts being the case, because these guys are sitting in a room in 1924 going, well, our industry is heading in a direction where within a decade, our products are actually going to get exponentially less profitable, because we're all starting to make light bulbs that are going to last 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, 100,000 hours. I mean, that would be like a lifetime of an individual. And at that point in time, you can't guarantee higher returns on that business year after year.
Well, we know that there's a light bulb in a Californian fire station that's been, it's on a webcam, you can look it up. I can't remember the name of the fire station. It's been going for over 100 years now. Yeah, and it hasn't burnt out.
They had a birthday for its 100th year, and already
and like most Americans, they celebrated it and sung it happy birthday. Yeah. You know, it has feelings.
They had a flag parade and everything. But let's, continuing on this. They literally, not only did they collude together, they actually, the boards of these companies agreed to enforce fines and penalties.
I read this.
On companies that whose average life exceeded 1,350, like 1,350 hours. Now,
and what they used to do is they used to test them. So that the main board, this Phobius group, would test the light globes from Australia, from Osram, from all these different companies, and if they were producing more than 1,000 hours, they would be fined accordingly.
Now just picture that. This is a model on which much of your society does function and will function. Something like this. It's like a tip of the iceberg. Most of it is underwater. It's sometimes, on rare occasion, 100 years after the event, that some documents swim up and they make you realize that powerful business groups that are supposedly competing against each other act to assure their mutual self-interest.
Of course.
And even when they split up, the huge Rockefeller Standard Oil empire into more than 10 companies, I think it took only 15 years for there to be, the Seven Sisters cartel, for that to be consolidated onto 7, who CEOs sat in the same room and devised how to make the market.
Look, we don't even want to go back to the way the price of petrol is set, because we know they get together and they ring around and they set their prices. It's it's like the LIBOR rate, but we don't talk about that.
Yeah, we're about 10 minutes in, guys. So at about 35-40 minutes, Chris is gonna let you in on his genius method of democratizing, shall we say, the fuel prices.
Oh, we'll sort them out.
But, and so now we've got perhaps the first documented example, and there's another really good one, which was stockings.
Oh, yeah.
So the
This comes straight out of end of the World War II. Japan come out with nylon. I mean, you could get a pair of stockings in the first prototypes of this nylon stocking. You could tie 3 of them together and tow a Jeep. They
have recorded videos. You can find them on. We watched this documentary called Pyramids of Waste, alternatively titled The Light Bulb Conspiracy.
Yes, and I'll tell you something right now. YouTube has dropped it, and it's very hard to find it on the internet because it breaches copyright, believe it or not.
But you'll find it on Top Documentary Films, even though it keeps getting dropped from YouTube and channels. Top Documentary Films is always going to have a TDF. It's always going to have a copy. But literally, they make these stockings.
You could tow a Jeep, and they wouldn't ladder. They wouldn't break, stretch, or ladder in the middle.
Basically, women buy a pair of stockings, and that's it, Decades later, they would actually have to get stabbed to tear through them or something.
I think they were better than Kevlar. I think you could take a bullet in them.
Well,
they were made for the army.
Let's not exaggerate here, but...
Yeah, they were strong. They didn't break.
Yeah. Women's stockings that simply didn't break. And
so they had to go back. They had to go back to the chemist and say, you need to make these things more fragile.
And, you've got to wonder, I mean, even as an engineer, I've never actually been in a situation where I got set down and told, you need to make this product crappier. You need to make this thing fall apart.
Or you won't have a job, Sonny.
Or you won't have a job. But I'll tell you what I did experience. And time again.
This is where you've worked in the past.
In the company where we designed pumps. And
let's not name names.
Well, let's not name names. I might get sued. They make you sign all these confidentiality agreements. That's right. I didn't even read the agreements, to be honest, and I'm a bit embarrassed about that. But basically, every time that we would release a new product out there, so there is a market. And we have initially a target price that we're going to sell our product for.
Work towards.
Now, when our product exceeded our expectation, when we actually built something that was awesome, it's not that we got told, no, guys, go and fuck it up a little bit. Essentially what happened is that price that we were initially targeting just tripled. So when we had products that lasted a really long time, that had really low maintenance, that were really robust, they would be priced exceedingly highly. And it wouldn't be because the company is greedy. It'd be kind of to compensate for the fact that we're not going to make a lot of money on spare parts.
Mm-hmm. It's where you make money.
And spare parts was one of the most lucrative parts of the business. I mean, we are in a sales department. We probably had 70 people working in sales, and 12 of them were working in spare parts. I think one of the highest paid people in the company was the spare parts manager.
Well, a perfect example, Sonny, and if we go back to this pump thing that you were building, you're building pumps. If you tried to build that pump from spare parts, right? So you ordered each individual part and you built it at home, what would that pump cost, Sonny?
It would probably cost like
10 times.
Yeah.
It would be 10 times plus what the initial pump would cost.
Yeah.
Because the reason is that's how they make their money. They make their money out of those spare parts. And that's right across the industry. That's in the automotive industry. That's in my industry. And I'm in the mechanical services industry.
Chris, you told me a story the other day. It was about bearings and air conditioners.
Oh, well, very, very simple. A lot of companies that manufacture air conditioners and mechanical pumps and stuff like that, they get what's called a bearing made by, say, a big bearing company called like SKF, right? They're multinationals. They make thousands of bearings, right? So they'll make a bearing, and then I'll be working on this piece of equipment, and I'll pull this bearing off. And I'll go, well, I need a new bearing because it's burnt out. So instead of going to the manufacturer, right, because sometimes these manufacturers are out of business, so you can't really go there. They don't have spare parts. So I've got to go to the bearing company, and I see SKF, and then I go to the place. I say, I need another replacement of this bearing. And the guy looks at it, gets the numbers off it, and goes, no, I can't sell you one of them. Why not? Well, because we don't have them. I said, what do you mean you don't have them? There it is. It's been made. He goes, well, we call that like a ghost bearing. I said, well, what does that mean? And he says, well, it's in the book. It shows that this bearing was made by SKF. It does exist, but we aren't allowed to sell it. It was made exclusively for the company who manufactured the unit. So it's one size out. So no other bearing will fit it.
Yeah.
So you have to
firstly, like, you make the maintenance of your part that you've engineered purposefully harder and more expensive because you're not using standard components.
Well,
and secondly, right?
It's done on purpose.
Yeah.
But here's the clincher. So if I was to buy a bearing from this SKF company and say it was a $14 bearing, right? If I went to go to the manufacturer to buy the same bearing, but obviously it's one size bigger or smaller, that bearing is 8 times dearer if I buy it from the manufacturer because they have what's called a licensing agreement where SKF can't sell it through their general stores. It must only be bought through the supplier who manufactured the unit.
You're essentially, as a producer of a product, you're unnecessarily complicating it, making it harder to repair, purely to set yourself up for future profit with spare parts. You could make it from standard parts. Now, Chris, if we drag it out, I have a 3D printer over there that's open source. And the idea, I mean, we're going to talk about open source technologies probably in the next podcast or in the one after the next. But the idea behind open source technologies is you make stuff out of standard components. In effect, if you bought it part by part, if you excluded the shipping costs, it would cost you less than you paid for a finished open source product, not 10 times more. And just to add to the example that you gave us about the bearings and air conditioners, my company, we sold 2 types of pumps. One had no moving parts and a titanium component, and the other had a 2 joints, articulated ball joints that were immersed in oil, in an oil bath.
Yes.
Now, they both did the same job. One was slightly longer than the other. Believe it or not, the titanium, no moving part component was cheaper. And cheaper for us, the company, we sold it for 4 or 5 times more money.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have a product that will not break down, you have no spare parts business, and then you gotta, price it out of the range of most consumers and push that the thing that breaks down to most of your customers. Here you go. You'll be back. We know. See you later.
We can see this in the automotive industry. Like, the automotive industry makes billions of dollars, right? Like, let's talk about Ford and GM, right? These companies make billions of dollars in their spare parts, right? Not on the, I mean, okay, they build a car and they sell it, they make a buck on it. They make more money out of spare parts, and it goes back to the pump thing. If you tried to build a car out of spare parts, it would cost you 100 times more than what it would if you bought the car, because that's how they make money. Now, I know, and I can't give you a link or a website, but I know from a Bosch engineer that I used to work with years ago, told me that it was a model car, a 1990 car, Holden GM car, that they put a bearing in the front, in the hub axles at the front, that would do 200,000 Ks and then collapse.
Yep.
Right? It was built to collapse. Now, back to the bearing thing again. You couldn't buy this bearing from anyone else but Holden, and it was expensive. But it was outside of warranty. They knew it when it was outside of warranty that it would collapse, and then you would have to come and buy one off them. I'll give you another example. We had a guy that come to a meeting that I was part of a while back, and he said he used to work for a company that would do the maintenance on LCD and plasma TVs. And he come to the meeting, and the reason why he got involved with our group, which I won't talk about now, what our group was discussing, but the reason why he got involved, because he was disgusted that the TV would come in under warranty, and the computer card in the TV was buggered, right? So he would pull that card out of the box, which cost $30, like tops. And he would put it in the machine, plug it all back in, set it all up, turn it on, and then the product would go back to the client. Well, his boss would come down and say, now in Australia here we work on 240 volts, right? 50, 55, 60 hertz, right? His boss would come down and say, set the board, because these boards were for European, American, and Australian, 110 volt, 240, whatever it is in Europe, I don't know. He would say, set it for 110. He goes, but these are 240 volt, thingo. And he'd go, well, do you want to keep your job? So what the boss was initially doing was saying, send the TV out under warranty. We've fixed the board, right? So it goes back to the client. And in 2 years' time, that board will be burnt out again because it's set for 120 volt when we're running at 240 volt here. Yeah. So they would get a job. Now, that board would cost them $30 to buy from Panasonic, say. But they were charging, when someone brought the TV back 2 years from now, they were charging $500-600 for the same board to be replaced in that TV set. He was disgusted, and his boss said, well, do you want to keep your job? So you know what he did in the end? He went, well, while the boss is not looking, and I'm putting the boards back in, he used to set them for 240 and send them out, because he was so upset by it. But that's just the way it is.
Well, Chris, we've given the audience probably now 5, 6, 7 examples out of this, some purely historical, well-documented, others in our personal lives.
Yeah.
Now, if we're going to look back and find the cause, for this, where does this idea of let's build stuff to break down, where does it come from? And then
well, it's simple. It's greed, and it's greed.
It has a historical, a crunch point, and it all revolves around 5 years before the Depression till after the Second World War, and at that point there is a complete transition.
Well, we went from needs.
Yes, from needs to wants, but also from quality to insubstantial style and total disposability of goods. And here it is.
There's different types of obsolescence, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, let me cover this sort of. I actually have.
We've talked about the mechanical breakdown of obsolescence, but there are other obsolescence. And we could talk about computer software. We can also talk about style and trends. Something becomes old, it's not so trendy, so you want the new one with the new upgrades and the new shiny case, and like a new car. Oh, you got last year's car.
Well,
not this year's car. The new year's car's better, it's shinier. Status through style.
A lot of it has got to do. Just let me read this. This is from a documentary called War by a guy called Scott Noble, and then it pretty much discusses this crunch point in history, where this transition from a goods and services economy.
Can I take a guess?
To a
Can I take a guess?
Take a guess.
Straight after World War II?
Yeah. Well, here, I'll read it. In the 1920s, business leaders were faced with a dilemma. Overproduction of goods had exceeded demand. Production between 1860 and 1920 had increased 12 to 14 times, while the population only increased by a factor of 3. Now, just picture that. We're going 1860 to 1920. This is the Industrial Revolution. Production increased by 12 to 14 times. So even though human beings are increasing their population at an unprecedented rate in history, population increased 3 times over, it could never keep up with the increase in the efficiency of machines and the output of this technology.
Well, see, the thing is, the war machine was really good because what it did was put in mass production.
And I continue. There were several ways of solving this problem. One was to reduce working hours and raise wages so the production and consumption reach an equilibrium. Pretty simple. We're producing too much. 3 times too much. Therefore, we could produce the same with 1/3 the work. We could have a 3-day, we could have a 2-day working week.
Part-time?
We could have a 2-day working week. We could all have all the stuff that we need. And life would be awesome.
But we could work those extra 2 days and produce enough for the third world.
Yeah. I mean, this is literally a dilemma for the 1920s, all right? In 1920s, our capacity to use technology to meet the needs of human beings had already reached such a level that poverty made no more sense, and every single person, even at least in the Western world, could afford to have a comfortable lifestyle and work 2 days a week. But I continue. This would have led to more leisure for workers and a higher standard of living. The problem with this solution is that it could have entailed a slight decrease in profits. Well, clearly, if your efficiency is going up and up and you're competing, your margins are staying relatively tight. And as your efficiency is exceeding the increase of population, I mean, you're meeting people's needs and there's only so much that they need. And that, 7-8% growth on production and exports and manufacturing stuff every year can't be sustained because, the people can't multiply that quickly when you have that as a paradigm within your economy. Now, where am I? Yeah, corporations, and even we're talking a slight decrease in profits. But of course, corporations are mandated by law to maximize profits on behalf of their shareholders, regardless of the social environment costs. So, that extra 3% for a corporation that takes a profit from, say, 10 to 13%, it's profit maximization. And that is more important than anything. It's more important than your environment. It's more important than your human needs. It's more important than your comfort, your leisure. Anyway, according to business leaders, there was another problem. And this is from publications at the time. Joel Edgerton, the president of National Association of Manufacturers, this is like an association of business leaders of the time, warned that a shorter work week would undermine the work ethic and potentially ferment radicalism. Meaning that if your workers have some free time,
they might have time to think, Sonny.
They
Don't
might
want them
have
thinking.
time to think. That actually, even in the 1920s, the business leaders, the people that run the world, were afraid of giving people free time because then they might work out that even though they may live comfortable lives, there is a distinct level of inequality and exploitation that is taking place in society. They may want to participate a little bit more in their lives, and then it does threaten.
But they might have wanted to spend their
structures.
free time learning to make those machines even more efficient where they didn't have to be there at all.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want that.
So, I think it's not necessarily that it's a very threatening idea, but if you are in a control of a system that is functioning, and you have exceedingly high levels of power, introducing a variable like having your workers have a lot of free time to perhaps change their lives and start thinking a little bit more, is not it's an unnecessary risk. It may put that maximization of profit in danger, and it's not a risk they're willing to take.
Well, they understood back then in the 20s. See, a lot of people would be fascinated that we're talking about the 1920s here, right? And they're already talking about debt slaves back then.
Yeah. And look, and he finishes off by saying the emphasis should be put on work. More work, better work, and no emphasis on the leisure. It seems a harmless enough statement, but what businessmen were advocating was revolutionary. Production was no longer about satisfying human needs. It would be the end in and of itself. Now, at the same time, this isn't in my notes, but this is a crunch time in like human history. This is where all the propagandists from World War II, from World War I firstly, and then from World War II, we're talking Edward Bernays, Ivy Lee, Robert Lippmann.
Yeah, the psychologists.
Yeah, the people that have applied the theories of
manipulation, mass manipulation
through
psychology.
The two great psychologists that there was Jung and the main guy Freud before him, and Edward Bernays was a nephew of Sigmund Freud. So you get these war propagandists who are now called into these business meetings, and they're
probably looking for their work.
And
the war's over. Got to go find a job.
And they're told, listen, we're producing way too much stuff. You need to go out there and convince these people to buy, well, 4 times the amount of stuff that they're buying right now. And so the manufacturers have an incentive at that point in time. All right, we need to make stuff that breaks down. We need to make these, I don't care, like these mugs that we got right here. These things, since we can't build them to fall apart, we need to make sure that you guys can make them uncool in a year from now.
Yeah, they're just so old and untrending.
They're just so old, and that's so not the in thing. So this is the birth of advertising, of manipulation to make you feel insecure and unsatisfied with yourself, with your life, and to make you look for solutions and enlightenment in products.
Well, it's also status in society. I have a new car. I have new glasses that we drink from. See, I don't have last year or the year before's car and old glasses.
It's a new kind of status because, back then, status used to be, and, this is sort of my parents' generation. That's why they felt so important for me to go to university and do like one of those highly respectable degrees like engineering, law, or medicine. Status used to be, this guy's really smart. He's kind of qualified and he does amazing stuff. But now status has become like, yeah, that guy's got like a kilo of gold and he's riding around with a Hummer whose wheels like spin and...
Oh yeah, they spin when the car stands still.
Yeah, like status has become this meaningless thing of accruing trinkets. And, I mean, this type of mental disease, I would say like the elites in Britain, not that I've had a lot of social interaction, I have had some, I dare say, that they still have some of those, I would say, positive old values. But the elites in the United States, I mean, you got billionaires competing for who has more mentions and more private planes and better private planes. I mean, it doesn't end. Like, even...
We get that in society today, though. When you have, let's say you're 22, 23 years old, you've got nothing, you just have a job, you earn a basic wage, yet you will go out and buy a pair of sunglasses because they have a name brand on them that are probably 3 or 4 weeks' wages, and you're not buying it for quality. You're buying it for status.
Yeah.
Or you're buying a Gucci bag, and you say, no, that's a real Gucci. I bought a real Gucci because you're trying to bring yourself up to this, I'm as important as the guy who could buy 3 Gucci, or the woman who could buy 3 Gucci bags and not think anything of it because she's loaded with money. So I'm bringing the way I see it, it's a mental illness. That's the way I see it.
Look, and I'll be I'll put my hand up and, I'll say that right in the cupboard over there, I got 3 pairs of $300 jeans, and I don't know. At some point in time, you either buy into this idea that you're becoming better or cooler or more impressive, by adorning yourself with products whose value you've paid 100 times over for. That they're maybe not 100, but 50. They probably cost someone $7-8 to make in a third world country.
Mm-hmm.
But secondly, even if you don't buy into it, you're still surrounded. I mean, like, it will, as sick as it is, it will actually help you get laid if you're wearing $300 jeans. It actually will, because
you
girls
got
are going to go,
you got a bit of...
those are those new nudies, like, yeah, that's totally hot. And what type of, like, the society has become so backward where people are actually impressed by your stupid decision, like by your completely nonsensical decision to pay 50 times the value of an item, and your smugness of the fact that you did. Like, nah, if you do that, you're a fuckwit. And I don't know, maybe I missed out on some action, but I'd rather do that than just know that I'm a fuckwit.
Look, these people are artificial, right? And it's not their fault. This is what they've been brought up to believe. And my grandfather used to say to me, clothes don't make the man, right? So if he's wearing a suit and he looks smart and he's dressed smart, he wears an expensive watch, it doesn't make him smart. It doesn't make him intelligent. And yet, you see on these shows, and I know everyone knows this show, whether you are anywhere in the world, it's called Big Brother, right? And I remember watching it one night because I just, it makes me giggle. These people are morons. But anyway, one guy gets on there, hard-working guy, European background. He's a tiler, right? Works his ass off, 40, 60, 80 hours a week, right? And he buys all the trinkets. He's got the super slick looking car. He's got the brand name T-shirt. He's got the brand name jeans. And he says exactly the opposite of what my grandfather used to say. He says, "What you wear is who you are." But that's what he believes. But why does he believe that? Because that's what advertising tells us.
And I mean, I stress this again. I'm repeating it. It is so endemic that even, like, billionaires buy into it.
Of course they do.
You have people who have 5 mentions feeling insecure about their wealth because the next guy's got bigger mentions and his private plane is actually supersonic.
Well, see, this is where we are today. We're up on the 80th floor, right, of Sonny's apartment here, right? I'm on the 100th, right? So I'm doing a lot better than Sonny. This wood grain 70s style, it's retro. We've retro fitted out this yuppie apartment.
Yeah. But no. On a serious note, I think is there anything we missed? I have some stuff in my notes that, for example, the inbuilt obsolescence.
Well, I think a lot of people. I think the other thing too is not just getting. This might be a little bit off track. But I think there's a lot of people out there that believe, right, that having money, right, acquiring wealth is going to bring some sort of happiness through buying trinkets. But if that was true, then these millionaires should be laughing their head off because, they've got all the money in the world and they should be super, super happy. Yeah. But they're never happy. Yeah. You know why? Because they're always trying to outdo one another. Or they're trying to outdo, the next guy down the road, or you got the old Learjet, I got the new one, I got the new model, and it's the old American theme. It's freedom and happiness through unlimited consumption. I mean, it's a joke. It's a joke, and it's a sick joke that gets perpetuated every day on the TV.
And isn't it? I mean, this podcast is about technologies, myths, and realities, and isn't it just amazing how embedded technology is in our society? It's kind of like a canvas, and beautiful, amazing ideas that can change the world, feed everybody, and bring every hippie dream true can be painted on that canvas, and so can the most subversive, manipulative things you can imagine.
But
And
we've talked about...
we start off at a point where people who own factories are producing more than people can buy. And we end up with a point that necessitates a culture of manipulating billions of human beings into habits that are destroying the environment, the earth, into insecurity about themselves and their life, and all because at some point in time, 50 years earlier, some dudes were sitting in a factory going like, people can't buy all the stuff we're making, we need to force them to buy it somehow. You know?
But see, back then we had a race, back in pre-20s, right?
Mm.
With the Industrial Revolution, we had a race to the top.
Yeah.
Build the best product, build it better. Okay, there was also the price factor, but build a great product and you build a brand and people will buy it. Now, I know I've bought this generic cup. It's made by, let's say, Hanson, right? Let's make up a company name. Hanson builds stuff that lasts forever. Well, when they hit 1922, it was then become a race to the bottom. It was, let's build it cheaper. It's all about price. Let's build it cheaper. But not only that, because we have to build it cheaper, we're going to use cheaper materials. I mean, you know, it's like making it worse and worse and worse to the point where it practically you use it 3 times and you chuck it in the bin. And I don't know where you are in Europe or the US but here in Australia we have this shop called the $2 shop or the €2 shop. And what it is, it sells Chinese junk that's so cheap. And it could be a can opener or a pen, and the pen will work twice. And then it'll break because it's made of the worst material you've ever seen. And then you chuck it in the bin, you go, well, I only paid $2 for it. But the stupid thing is you go back to that shop and you buy another one. And it's not because you want to buy a better one, it's just that you can't afford to buy a better one. You know, you want to have all these things, pens and can openers and TV sets, but you don't have unlimited funds, so you can't go buy the best. And we've got to the point in society today where there isn't a best anymore. I remember when I was growing up, if we talk about tools, because that's where I come from, you buy this tool called, and I'm going to do a brand name, Black & Decker. They were the best. They were indestructible. And then they used that indestructible name. You know, you buy Black & Decker, it's going to last forever. It's a tradesman's tool. And then they junked it. They started selling that product and they made it inferior and less inferior. You know, we're just getting worse and worse. Still saying, no, we build the best, we build the best. This stuff is junk. You chuck it out the window now. And what they do is then they dump that brand, they move on to the next one. And they'll steal someone's brand who probably makes something that's half reasonable, and they junk it down.
And also that happens because, see, companies are not... If there was one guy, and if you're the company, it's, you know, your reputation is at stake for building something. But if it's a corporation, the shareholders change overnight. And, you know, you could have Black & Decker today. It might have been started by a dude called Black and a dude called Decker who tried to make the best tools humanly possible, and they were really proud of their tools. But, you know, 30 years later, they retire, some billionaire buys the company and goes, how do I make more money out of this?
Yeah, but see, wait a minute. Let's talk about a family business, right? If you're running a family business, let's say it's Black & Decker, right? Mr. Black and Mr. Decker. And they build these tools, right? They're building on reputation. Yeah, sure, they've got to make profits. They've still got to keep their workers happy. They want to build a good product. It's a race to the top. Let's build the best, right? But when it gets bought out by a company, the company's the opposite, right? Because now it's all about more profits every year, right? So reduce wages, automation, bring in automation. So what's the next big thing? We've got rid of wages. We've brought in automation. How can we make more profit selling the same product? Well, we can. We can make it look like the same. But what we do is we use inferior metals, inferior products to build this thing, and we run it into the ground to the point where it becomes nothing, and then we buy up the next brand name.
And there's always, you know, in a scale of a market, there's always a curve of highest quality to lowest quality. And at any point in time, there's somebody who has a good tradition who's basically cashing in on it and making shit.
They're practically all gone now. All those companies that used to build quality products, they're all gone. They don't exist anymore. You can't even say, look, I'm prepared to pay 5 times more for that product if I know it will last me, if I can hand that product over to my son and it'll still work as good as the day I bought it. It doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. It's so far gone, it's not funny. And this come about, you can actually, there was a movie brought out called Death of a Salesman. black and white. I think it's 50s, could be a little bit earlier.
I read the book. I don't know if it's John Steinbeck, but I've read the book, and it's about this guy who's essentially struggling.
I think he's a door-to-door, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a door-to-door, and he's struggling with
selling a product that he doesn't like. He doesn't even.
Yeah, and he's basically making ends meet with credit, and he's buying things on credit, and he's always complaining about they time these things like. Every time by the time you finish paying for it, it falls apart, so you have to buy the new one.
Well, he was right. He was right back then.
It was right. You're right. It was right back then, and it wasn't an obvious thing. Now, let me just mention one more thing that is a consequence of this consumer. That is a consequence of planned obsolescence. Mm-hmm. Planned obsolescence, if you have not heard that word, is also called product life cycle. Now, life cycle will just sound so much nicer than planned obsolescence, but that's what they actually teach in many universities, especially in design schools. They teach
to engineers.
To engineers, you will be asked to make products that break down, and this is how you do it. We'll help you design products that are disposable, that break down, that are into some fashionable things that are going to go out of fashion. But what is the product of all this? It is mountains of waste, mountains of e-waste. We're talking. It's something like America makes 15 million tons of e-waste a year, most of which are shipped to China and Africa, where people rummage through it and burn it up to dig for components. Now, this is all made out of petrochemicals, fire retardants. So it is doing a little bit of poisoning to us, the first world users, through leaching just a little bit, and a whole lot to the Chinese and Africans that are actually having to burn it off to grab the copper out of it, to salvage through it, and go through, the lead, the mercury, the whatever unhealthy trace metals.
But wouldn't it be good? Wouldn't it be good if we built a product, right, that lasted 20 years? Let's say a computer, right? Okay, it wasn't as fast and it didn't keep up, but it lasted 20 years, and then we go, all right, we're in a first world country, we can afford to buy a new one every couple of years, right? Then we could take that product, because we know it's durable, and we could send it to a place like Africa, where it could be used, like there's a guy around the corner from me, he buys typewriters. He buys old typewriters. Now you think, who the hell wants a typewriter? He buys the ones that plug into power and the ones that don't plug into power. He delivers it to a third world country, and they use it today to do work with it, because these typewriters were built to last, number one, especially the old mechanical ones that didn't plug in, and half these third world countries don't have electricity. So he makes, even though they're junk in our society, over in there, they make $1 selling them. But we could talk about, there's exceptions to the rule of what we've just been talking about.
And, alright, you can mention that, because I have one more point to raise, and this is kind of like the finite planet versus the infinite growth. And first of all, we're having this society that says, you must, profit motive is there.
Consume.
The role of a corporation is to maximize profit. See, it's not just to make money. It is to maximize profit. It is to make all the humanly possible decisions that lead to higher margins and ever more money. So it's not like, do good in the community, don't create waste. No. If you could externalize the waste, if you can dump it and get away without paying it, create waste. If your products get trashed after a year and they don't come back on warranty, or you don't have a warranty on them, or they keep buying more, do that. So whatever, they have these series of decisions that lead to a paradigm where Earth is being dug up, we're burning up the oil, we're taking up all the resources, and there's so much waste that we're actually reaching a point where they can't keep growing and selling it anymore. And this is a fact. Now, due to this fact, though, there have been some quite dangerous ideologies that people that believe same as Chris and I about that this infinite growth paradigm must end also have some ideas that they're smuggling in. For example, overpopulation. We are thrashing the earth because there's too many humans on it. And
this is bullshit. This is such a bullshit argument. I hear this so many times. There's so many people, we're overpopulated, we should do something about it. And I say to people who say that, well, why don't you kill yourself? because that would be one less person we'd have to deal with.
And you just look at we're the only species on planet Earth who could go to a desert and turn the freaking thing green, you know? I think Earth would do better if human beings actually actively used our technology, which is exceedingly powerful, to go like, oh, look, we need to manage this Earth environment ecosystem. We need to create more life. We're the only species on planet Earth. I mean, monkeys can't, I mean, they could be intelligent. They can't go out and plant forests. You know, dolphins and whales could conceivably have more intelligence and processing power than us, but
can't put it into action.
I don't see them building rivers and dams and irrigating the deserts or changing the flora and fauna on the sea floor.
They still seem to swim close to those Japanese whaling ships.
But my point is, I'd like to see an Earth with 20 billion humans without deserts. You know, I'd like to see 20 billion humans without these shopping centers and the super highways and mountains of e-waste. We could actually integrate our life in a way that we're literally living within vegetation.
Of course we can.
We're living on solar power, on energy that doesn't involve us burning toxic petrochemicals.
Well, we can build batteries today that that can produce power for 5-10 years and then be chucked straight into landfill and actually break down and become a fertilizer for the ground.
Graphene batteries. And Chris and I, watch this space. We're gonna try to create a capacitor out of graphite oxide and a CD that you put in a CD player. You supposedly produce graphene, and graphene has a capacity to act as a capacitor. Capacitor is like a battery, but much quicker charge and discharge. So the first idea I covered is, yes, we can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. But no, the Earth is not overpopulated. That is an argument of the same people that brought to you eugenics, that brought to you racism, that brought to you slavery. That is a fallacious argument. The second argument is sustainable development, headed by the UN, also known as Agenda 21. If you haven't heard of Agenda 21, I really suggest you look it up. But it is this...
No, keep going.
It is this plan to essentially make us into docile prisoners living in a relatively comfortable prison of high-rise buildings that go up to 100 floors, where we are plugged into virtual reality and play video games all day, where corporations own and run everything, and we're run off the farms, run off the rural land into these mega jam-packed cities.
Well, that won't happen to me, Sonny, because I don't drink fluoride.
Well...
Anyway, no, what we should do, and we're getting a little bit off topic because we could talk about Agenda 21. That could be a whole new show. What we should talk about is the positives. We should be talking about the positives of society. Now, one of the things I've got here, because I was in the army once, I won't say which one, but anyway, I was in the army once, and one thing I did notice that when the army builds stuff for themselves, you know, I'm talking all armies, the stuff is built and engineered to last. They don't want this shit to break. And one of the things I've got here, you can probably see it on the cam. It's a shovel. It's a German shovel. Oh, no. American shovel. No, German. Sorry, German. It's German built. Germans build some really good stuff. They're really good engineers. Now, what this is a shovel. It's a pick. And, see, shovel, pick, got a wooden handle on it. Very basic engineering. But my God, it's some heavy piece of equipment. As far as, not as in weight, as in heavily engineered. The bolts are, I mean... It's riveted, it's steel, it's got a big brass nut in it.
Hasn't rusted out. Now, look, this seems like there it is. It seems like a silly shovel, but I will give you an example from my personal life.
But
we have, in this house where I live, we have a backyard with lots of, veggie patches and stuff growing, and we're trying to build a pool, but we've gone through so much equipment that we've returned and gotten new stuff on warranties, particularly stuff that digs the earth. Forks, completely bent out of shape, falling apart, that we've returned. Shovels that have cracked. Hand shovels, metal hand shovels that have cracked. plastic shovels that have cracked. Essentially, it is virtually impossible, and we've moved from the cheap brands to the more expensive brands. But
No, there's no difference. The thing is,
there
this
is
shovel,
a difference, a huge difference.
This shovel was designed and built in Second World War, right? And this one here is stamped 1965, but my brother has one that was 1940. And they have never changed the design. Why? Because it works. It doesn't break. Now, not only this, the shovel, but there's other things that the Army make. You know, anything that's Army surplus, 90% of the time, it's built to last forever. I have a vinyl drop sheet. We used it as what the Army calls it I forget, a long time ago when I was in there. But I had this thing for 15 years and I could not put a hole in it. And in the end, it got so bad. I mean, it got to the point where it fell to bits, but it lasted 15 years. It was a sheet of nylon that I used to lay on the ground when I was working because, you know, the ground would be dirty and muddy and all the rest of it. 15 years. I bought a Chinese replacement because I couldn't buy the one I originally had because it was from the Army. It didn't last 6 months, right? Now, there are other examples too. When we talked about Second World War and how the production using technology, because mass production, like if you, in a light bulb factory, in the aircraft factory, in the car factory, a lot of, I would say robots, but I would say machines that can punch out huge volume with little maintenance or little, it wasn't one man per machine. It was, let's say 5 machines per one man, right, to maintain, to keep running. So they push technology to a point where they can mass produce. And a perfect example, anything that's mass produced production line, they build machines there that don't break. Now, if they've got to put a tungsten or gold or some exotic metal in there so the machine will not break down, it's worth their while.
Now,
they'll spend the money.
I worked in an engineering company that has a lot of equipment. We had lathes, we had things that bend machinery, we had the things that put threads that were from the 1800s. Literally stamped stuff from the 18. We have it running today. We have 100-year-old factory machinery running today.
You know why? But you know why?
Needing less repair and less maintenance.
But why? Because it was made to last. And the reason thing is, what they do now is they speed those machines up. They make them run faster, and they do have some issues with that because they're making them run them 10 times faster than what they were in the 1800s. Through technology, they can do that, computerization. But you'll find out, if you go to a lot of machinery shops, they're running presses from pre-World War One. Why? Because they're built to last. And we've also, one of the other things that if a company like the companies that run diesel locomotives around the planet, like in America and Europe, after steam, they built these diesel engines, right? Now, they're 18-cylinder diesel electrics. These engines can do hundreds and thousands of hours, 60 years' work, right? They pull the top of the motor off when the train practically rusts around the engine. They pull the engine out. They pull the heads off. They check them. They do a couple of adjustments, a bit of cleaning. They put the things back together. Another 60 years. They use the best rings. They use the best pistons. They use the best bearings. They're built. The engineers in the day were told, when these things sit on the track and they break down, they cost us a lot of money. So they've got to be built to last forever with minimal maintenance. And they're around today. I mean, we're still using diesel electric trains that were built in the 40s today. The same motors. We just pull the motor out and we give it a touch up, clean up, and then we check it, make sure it's all good again, and we just put it straight back into a new locomotive. Why? Because they run forever.
And, I think it's time to do a bit of a recap on the show. And it's as soon as we've done that, we're going to go into the petrol
gas
idea. But just as Chris said, why are we doing this podcast? Why is there a podcast about technologies, myths, and realities?
Because we've had enough!
Reiterating, technology is this canvas that different parties have a capacity to generate incredible stuff.
We're angry.
No, Chris.
We're angry.
Like, picture this, just your awareness that the cars that you're driving in could last 5 times longer, that the factories that you see around you could be used and directed in a way that such an abundance of goods is generated, and this goes from food production through to your televisions, that even in 1920s, a 2-day working week was just the realistic norm. You know, like, well, are we going to do this, or are we going to force them to buy more stuff? Now, if you know this, then you may make some decisions in your life that you choose to buy as much stuff from companies that believe in open sourcing their materials. Chris's product, the zero fluoride filter, is totally in line with that ideology, and he's made it 100% recyclable.
Well, I try my best, but you've also got to remember is because of the way my filter is constructed, it's an absorption filter. So it gets to a point where it's full. Now, that can be washed out, but needs to be washed out with acids, right, chemicals. And I wouldn't advise anyone to do that unless you knew what you were doing, to be using chemicals to
essentially,
flush out. But it can be recyclable. Like if you, we might work out something where you send it back to us after you finish using it. We'll, do some sort of deal with the postage, and we send the filter back, and then we can send it out to a company that can wash out, and we can reuse the product.
Yeah, and if you build things to design as long as humanly possible, if you build them to be designed to be recycled rather than dumped, we're going to meet our needs more easily. There's going to be way less poverty on the planet, way less environmental disasters, and we're going to live in a better world if people are aware that the goods around them are designed to be trash, designed for the dump, designed to fall apart. And once you start making consumer decisions away from that point, there is a real potential to change the world. And then a lot of where our society is and where it's heading is associated with technology. And I think on that note, we shall end with the topic.
Well, I just like to say one other thing too. Pre-World War II, most things in Europe were built to last, like fridges were built to last 25 years, and they last past 25 years. Like we talked about the light bulb, that was supposed to last, 20 years. The filament in the light bulb was supposed to last 20 years because they had finite. They couldn't just import, let's say, tungsten. I'm going to use tungsten. I'm not 100% sure. They couldn't import tungsten from America or England or anywhere like that because their countries were locked up. They're communist Russia, and East Germany. We're not going to give them nothing type of thing, right? So these companies, their engineers were told, make it last because we can't keep turning it over and replacing it. And after the war, after the breakup of the Russia's communist system, and when the wall fell down in Germany, all those businesses
got bought out.
Well, they either got bought out or they fell into the ground because they couldn't compete.
But here's the mental picture, guys. Mental picture. East Germans, Iron Curtain, suppressed, backward. This is in the 50s and 60s, 70s. Those guys who were decades behind America and Europe were producing fridges, light bulbs, bikes, not cars so much, I gotta say, but most definitely the white goods, washing machines and fridges, that are around today, that have easily outlasted 20, 25 years. And it's so achievable, it's beyond funny. So next time your machine falls apart, probably do some Google searching as to what...
And I think another thing too is if people go to Integrated Nature, they might find some other products coming out in the next 12 months that will last. Because that's one of the other things we'd like to push is products that we know that you can buy that will last, 10, 15, 20 years. And we think it's achievable. We think we could start with very basic products.
And more importantly, even than that, using as often as possible, cheap standardized components. It's not being in some business of making convoluted parts that we can earn a ton on spares. It's just like if you could use a standard bearing, use the cheapest possible standard bearing, that should it ever go wrong, not the cheapest possible, the highest quality of that module, but should it ever go wrong, you could buy it in 100 different stores for a pretty affordable price.
That's right. Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on to our
Big idea.
Petroleum, gasoline, petrol, which we call it here in Australia, unleaded, diesel, doesn't matter what it is, right?
Mm.
There's an idea that I come up with 12 months ago to fix the price of fuel. It's possible to do. Because I don't know whether you know this, Sonny, but in Australia here, in any state, whether it be Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, we have enough fuel in our big tanks in storage in these refineries, not just in the refineries, but in the holding tanks, whether it be Mobil, Royal Dutch Shell, British Petroleum, to last 4 days. 4 or 5 days at the tops. And if we have no more fuel coming in, that's it. We don't hold a lot of fuel in reserve, refined fuel, or even crude. So how these petrol companies work is on logistics. They know that in Victoria here where we live, they use X amount of litres per week, right? So 4 days of storage. The most amount of fuel is in transit. So there's a ship coming from Saudi Arabia now. There's probably 6 ships heading down from Saudi Arabia now, heading to Australia, and probably heading for Victoria. So majority of our fuel is in transit, and this happens in every city around the world. So we've got fuel coming into Melbourne. We've got 6 ships coming into Sydney. We got 8 ships we got 30 ships heading out of the Saudi thingo heading towards LA. Same as in England.
So here's the mental picture.
So understand that the fuel is always in transit, right? So here's what you do. If you can interrupt that fuel in transit, right, then you can hold those particular companies, right, sort of to ransom. Because they can't just ring up Saudi and say, hey, don't send us 6 ships this week because we're not selling enough fuel. They can't just stop it. This is how it works. These ships go every day, right? They can't just stop them. They can't divert them. They can't send them off somewhere else. So what happens is, if we devise a plan as a group of people, it takes a lot of people to do this, and here in Melbourne, it's not hard to do, we could say, this month, we're not going to buy Shell fuel. We'll buy every other fuel, BP, Mobil, Exxon, Chevron, all those fuels, but we won't buy BP for 1 month, right? Now, if people know this, and we put up a Facebook page and we say, do not buy this thing, that company will have a heart attack. A heart attack. They'll have fuel coming in. They can't get rid of it. So what they'll do is they'll plummet their prices. Now, the other companies have to fall on suit because let's say, did we say Shell?
We said Shell.
All right, let's say Shell drop their prices because they need to get rid of this volume that's coming in. The other companies will drop too because they don't want to lose sales and they can't see Shell fall over. So that happens 1 month. Then the next month we go British Petroleum. So we buy Shell, we buy Chevron, we buy Exxon, but we don't buy British Petroleum. They go into a heart attack. They ship down their prices.
And just to reiterate, like you've explained this, let's say we chose not to buy BP. BP has 4 days of fuel. Their tanks can hold 4 days, and that's full. They got ships coming in.
They can't. The ships will sit there.
If this fuel isn't filled into the tanks because the tank's already full, they're losing millions.
And
millions a day.
And the ships will be sitting out there in the port because they got nowhere else to go. They'll be just sitting there waiting to unload.
Costing BP millions.
Costing them millions. They may be able to divert a few interstate, but you got to remember, if Melbourne or a city is getting fuel coming in, so's the next city. So they can't send the ships up there to dump their fuel there because they don't have the capacity to store it. So it has to sit. And for them to make it sit, they have to drop the prices. Now, here's number 2. Let's just say, all right, I don't want to get on Facebook every day and check to see which station. I've forgotten this month because remember, we're not going to rotate it as in January BP, February Shell. It's no point because they'll work that out, right? So we're going to do it indiscriminately, right? So what about if I said, I can get a company that can send out a text every month to 100,000 people, cost you $1 a year, and I can send out 12 texts a year, because 12 months in a year, just in case people can't do the maths. Send out a text every month saying, this month we're not buying Shell. So just in case you go to fill up your car, oh, geez, was it Shell or BP? Was it Exxon? I got a text up this month, January, it's BP. We could send out a text for $1 a year. We could send out 12 texts so you would know which one not to buy. And I'll tell you right now, the fuel would go under $1 a litre in this country. I can tell you, overnight. With 1 week, they'd be panicking. The second week, they'd be saying, what the hell is going on? But it takes a lot of people to do it.
Chris, it's a genius idea. And I don't know. I don't think you want the copyright. Are you willing to rescind your copyright that you get by the virtue of your voice being recorded? Because honestly, if anybody wants to do it,
anyone could do it, they could do it.
I'd love to see somebody, after listening to this podcast, create a Facebook page, get things started on it, because I think awesome ideas like your one, just should be launched into
well, it takes the people. If you want change on this planet, you've got to get the people behind you. And corporations and the government and politics know this, right? They keep the status quo numb with sports and some celebrity throwing their girlfriend down a toilet, or like beating up his wife, or taking drugs. And I don't give a rat's ass about other people's lives as far as that goes. We should be more worried about, we're all the same. Muslim, Christian, whatever you are, who cares? You're from this planet. We should all be looking after one another, and we should come together as one, and we should say, look, enough is enough. We're being ripped, and we're sick of it. And even when I retire, I thought when I've worked my whole life and paid all my taxes, when I retire, why am I still paying bills? Why? I've worked my whole life. I paid taxes. I paid my bills. Give me a break. Let me spend the last couple of years of my life without having to pay.
No. You're going to get medical bills. See, here's the plan.
Oh, put me in asylum.
Even, it's kind of like the profit motive is an interesting thing. You see, people are ever less healthy, and they live ever longer. It's like the ultimate master plan for the pharmaceutical companies. It's heaven. Everybody's got allergies, food weaknesses, they got anemias, deficiencies, etc. And the old people are on, once you get past 70, you're on like 5 drugs. And you're living another 15 years. You're the ultimate consumer. You've saved a ton of money throughout your whole life, and now you get to spend it and give it to Big
bills
Pharma
to keep you alive.
And it's,
it's disgusting. Really, we should be lowering. Every year you should say, the government should come out and say, we've just lowered the age of retirement to 30. Because we don't need you to work anymore. We like it that you come and give us advice and stuff, but we don't need you to work. But that's what we'd like to see. I mean, this whole thing, I see this thing over in Greece. Oh, the Greek people, they're lazy, they retire early, they live off the government. Well, if I've paid taxes my whole damn life, why shouldn't I retire early?
And more importantly, this notion, they're bludging. Wait a second. You know what? Imagine we're like at an island where there is total abundance of animals and game, and it takes us an hour each morning to gather up everything we're going to need for the day. I mean, and then after that, whatever, we sing, write poetry, chill out. Are we bludging compared to the Scandinavians that have got, to work their ass off to build all their crops? In a sense, you do what you need to do to meet your basic human needs, which are shelter, food, water, etc. And now we live in a society where these can be met on an average by less than an hour labor from each person a day. But we have to invent an ever-escalating number of artificial fake jobs where we try to sell mobile phones to each other, rather than possibly have free time, because God knows if we have free time, we might start, thinking about the world.
So I'd like to sign off by saying my name's Chris Cool, and fuck you, petrochemical industry.
All right. You know what the young people do? Thank you, Chris. I thought you were confused. All right.
I am confused.
Now, I think it's about, podcast ending time, and
yeah. What's our next podcast, Sonny?
It's going to be on open source technologies. It is like the vision, the model for the future.
Now, if you're young out there, this is trendy. All right?
It's cool.
It's cool and trendy.
And Justin Bieber said so.
You can get your Ray-Ban sunglasses from a 3D printer now. All right? That's where it's going.
Now, also, yes, there'll be an icon. I'll put it up there to subscribe to this podcast. You can look us up on iTunes. Just search TMR Podcast on iTunes. And be nice, leave us a review.
And how about some comments? Do you like our show? Do you think we should change it? Do you think we should just piss off?
Okay. So that's all for today. Sonny here for Zeitgeist Melbourne, signing out. And indeed, you've been warped back a little bit. Today is actually the 8th of November, 2015. But that was a show Chris and I did back in 2012. I'll look up the exact date at some point. So much for today. We will be back next Sunday, starting as usual between 4:30 and 5. And we need a gap that big because, logistics and disorganized people. All right. Take care, y'all. Bye.